Welcome back to Wake Up with Joni, the podcast that explores the soul of transformation, empowerment, and sustained awakening. Today's guest is Zach Rodriguez, whose journey took him from the cockpit of a Navy helicopter to becoming a guide at the intersection of money and meaning. Managing money and finance is one of the most important things a human can learn. And yet, we're not taught how to navigate money energetically, spiritually, or practically. So, today's conversation is going to dive into all aspects of how you can create a healthy relationship to money and wealth. Zach is the founder of Outlive Financial Planning, and he is devoted to helping you bridge money, meaning, presence, and purpose. This is a powerful conversation you don't want to miss about wake up moments, conscious choice, and learning how to live now. So, welcome, Zach. I'm so happy you're here.
Thanks for the opportunity. I've been looking forward to it all day long.
I'm really, truly happy to have this conversation because I think it's such a foundation for people to be able to live their most alive lives, to be able to live well and not be in survival and not be afraid of where the money's going to come from. So let's start at the beginning. Tell us about the Navy pilot piece and what happened that woke you up and changed your trajectory.
Sure, I'd love to share. So, backing up even before then, and this is only something I put together recently, my father had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was basically 8 or 9 years old, and he ended up surviving. However, that and probably other things, looking back, there were several moments that gave me a respect for life a little bit more so than the average, or just unique to me, if you will. To get to your question, 6 months into basically my first operational flying tour, which is kind of why I joined the Navy to go and deploy and do the missions overseas. And in my case, it was operating from an aircraft carrier that was forward deployed in Japan, the Ronald Reagan in 2018. So I basically had been flying the gray operational aircraft, the MH-60 Romeo, for about 5, 6 months. About a week prior, I just basically earned the qualification of a co-pilot, or we call it H2P, helicopter second pilot. And we lifted up at the first go. We picked up off of the back end of the aircraft carrier for the first go of the day. It's 7 a.m. I've been up since 4:30 or 5 briefing the flight. And I was flying with the commanding officer of my squadron. So the most senior pilot of the squadron, who's been flying for 15 plus years. We pick up into a hover. So we're 15 to 20 feet from the flight deck. We then start going backwards, which of course is not really backwards because the ship's going forwards 30 miles an hour. Helicopter aerodynamics, I won't get into it now, but we're going backwards. And as soon as we go from what we call a hover in ground effect to a hover out of ground effect, when we go basically over the ocean and the flight deck's about 80 feet over the water, helicopter starts giving us some indications that there's not enough power being supplied to keep us in level flight. So the rotors slow down from 100% of the normal speed to 90%. Very quickly, just as we put in left pedal to begin flying away. So as a non-flying pilot, I verbalized basically the instrument that was reading that, albeit later than I should have. The flying pilot then made an input to go back to the flight deck. So at this point, we're only 20 feet or so from the aft end of the aircraft carrier. We then go forward and down, but as we go forward and down, their helicopter starts spinning. And so we start rotating, and then we contact with about 20 feet to spare the back of the flight deck on the aircraft carrier. As we're spinning, immediately roll over. Of course, at that point, the outer edge of the rotor blades, they're 33 feet in diameter, the outer 15 feet instantly spray everything and everybody, aircraft, people, and we're just rotating on the ground.
Wow.
It was about a minute, right around a minute long flight, for sure the shortest flight of my life. And so obviously a wild experience happened super quickly, not even much time to really think about it. But I would say in the that followed, I got back in the aircraft pretty quickly. It took about a few months administratively. But I would say the months and years to follow, it just slowly, after that happened and my kid was born 2 years ago, I just had a respect for time and life and just a different mindset than most 25, 27-year-olds at that time.
Got it. So what happened then? Did you stay in the Navy for a while and you had to finish your tour, I guess is what it's called.
Right. Yeah. So
Okay.
you're right. That was 6 months into my 3 year long tour. I was basically out of the cockpit for about 2 months until actually the admiral in charge of all naval aviation, I had to interview with that person. And so did my CEO in order for us to basically talk to him about, do we get to keep our wings and basically continue flying, or is there another avenue? We both kept our wings. There were things that we could have done better. There were actually mechanical malfunction with the helicopter. In either
Mm.
case, by that was in October of 2018. By January of the next year, I was flying and then went on to fly 700 more flight hours, earn various qualifications, and enjoy it, do a great job, and then move on to the next tour after that. So business as usual after a 2 month break.
Okay, got it. So when you came out of the Navy, I think my understanding is a lot of pilots will then become commercial pilots in some way or continue to fly. Did you continue to fly or what did you do? What was your career trajectory after that?
I have 4 months left active duty, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I have a few months left of active duty. I started my RIA, Outlive Financial Planning that you referenced, almost a year ago, last summer.
Mhm.
And but yeah, a friend of mine right now just shot me a text. He's in Dallas interviewing with Southwest. I hope it went well for him. But certainly a lot of my friends, helicopter or fixed wing, the commercial airlines is a supernatural transition because you usually have the hours, you have the experience, you are used to the flight schedule, and a lot of us enjoy it. So it's very natural to go airlines. I knew early on that was something that I didn't want to do. And it was actually one of those internal conversations where 80% of me, like, you don't want to do that. Then 20% of me is like, but it's so easy. It's a natural career path. You're going to make good money. And so there was constantly, even though I knew for me, of course, it's a great career. For me, I was like, this is not it. But for the past 5 years, I asked my wife how many times every quarter I was like, are you sure I shouldn't do airlines? And she's like, Zach, come on. You know the answer to this. It's a classic what you were born, meant, should do, but this seems so safe or normal, or all the other people around me are doing this.
Yeah. So a big piece of what I gather that you work with or you work with people on is how to have a quality life doing what they're doing. There's so many questions in here, actually, but it sounds you could have taken or you could take the easy path of flying if that was your passion, but instead you're going to follow your passion, which is helping people, which is the financial piece. Is that correct?
Absolutely. You hit it on the head.
So talk to people. Talk to people about the courage that takes to do what they're called to do instead of the easy piece.
I'm obviously in the middle of it. I'm convinced the hardest part is that first step. And I view that step not just as a second long as we actually take walking. I view it as a months long, years long, seasons long step. And I feel I'm in the middle of that step right now. But that step I view as the hardest thing, or maybe even the thought of lifting your foot and moving forward. But then as the second and the third step and the fourth, and then after you're doing the thing that you is in alignment with you, I feel like it's actually easier than doing the easy thing. The easy thing about the easy path, if you will, that first step isn't so hard. For me, for continuing in the Navy or continuing flying, there would have been a much less little that feeling in the stomach. Should I do this? Is that wouldn't have been there. But I'm confident that beyond that first step in this career path and the business I started, I'm just going to be on cloud nine that I get to do this, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yes. It's interesting to have this conversation with you now. I also want to have the conversation with you in 25 years, but I don't know that I'll be around. But there is a thing called the golden handcuffs. So I work with a lot of high level executives and corporate people, and they are making a lot of money. And that's the golden handcuff piece because they're stressed and the quality of life is not. Now, there are things that they can do, and that's what we talk about. There are things they can do to shift the quality of life, to bring themselves into the now. So I want you to talk about both of those things. The golden handcuffs, how do you move beyond that or deal with that? And two, what do you say to people on how to create that quality of life, regardless of what the job is, whether it's the barista at Starbucks or the CEO at the studio?
Okay, I love what you're sharing, and I wanted to interrupt you the whole time just with excitement. But for me, the cool thing about what I get to do is I'm such a naturally future-focused person that fortunately I married someone who is the opposite. He pulls me into the now. But I feel so many people, me, who I would describe as either want to be or overachievers who are just future-focused and will delay all the gratification now for something, the green grass in the future. The challenge that we have and the people that I want to work with is helping them just reel them back into the now because the number one, it sounds cheesy, but it's true. You're not guaranteed it later. And then number two, that season you're in now is so beautiful and amazing. You just never realize it until you look backwards. And so, what for me, what helps me and how I encourage people as far as the golden handcuffs is the rocking chair test. Visualize yourself in Colorado, maybe where you live. Personally, I have a place I go. It's the Colorado San Juan mountain range in my head, of course. There's a little creek running by my patio. I'm rocking on the patio. Beautiful summer day in Colorado, very clear. And in that moment, I'm like, am I happy? Do I regret? Am I happy that I did this, or do I have regrets that I did that? And I think if you can go to a future place and look backwards and say, I'm proud that I did that in that season, or I wish I would have done it better, that gives you all the answers you need, even if you're the most successful person around the C-suite folks you were talking about.
I love that because what you're talking about is 2020. So usually you have to live the experience, get to the end, then have 2020 in hindsight. You're saying have 2020 hindsight now while in it, which I love. So what I think is part of what you do, and I'm guessing, is balancing then, because your partner, you and your partner, which is a perfect blend, right? It's a perfect balance, but balancing saving for the future, setting things up well now, but not self-debting oneself in the moment so that there's a quality of life. And that's what this podcast is about, really. It's a quality of life. How do you set yourself up so that you live well now? That's your thing, and planned for the future because I'm in the future now. I'm
Hmm.
way older than you are, and I'm in
Right.
that future, right?
Sure.
I'll probably never stop doing what I do, but we'll see. I may run out of gas in a decade. We'll see. But I'm in the midst of still planning for the future.
Of course.
Things have gone well, things are doing well, and we are being conscious and smart about how we're living life now and for our future. So, what do you say to people?
Yeah. So it's basically little column A, little column B. You mentioned it. All of life seems a balance. It's whatever communication and relationship or what we just described, everything. But with this specifically, it's usually there's the person that's I can delay gratification or I can basically sacrifice. I was born frugal. I'm always frugal, even though I have a bunch of monetary wealth. And this future point, I'm going to have so much, and maybe at that point I'll retire because I have this much money. It's probably way too much money.
Then I'll live.
Or and then I'll live. Or there's the person that's the profligate spender. I might have someone in my family that we all do, of course, that just they spend all their money, maybe the bank's money too, and there's no consideration of the future whatsoever. And
Hmm.
so it's it's not easy, but it's relatively simple. It takes a lot of work. But what I do is I ask people what's actually important to you or you and your family, you and your spouse, you and your partner now and in this season of life. Maybe you have kids, maybe whatever the season is, what's important now, and then where are we going in the future? Not even tell me what it's 20 years from now, just what's important to you. And
Hmm.
that the hard part is we all have scripts or programming or subconscious thoughts that we need to live out the Joneses life. And I think I've
Hmm.
actually heard it on your podcast before, where either you or a guest or both basically talked about living at your own vibration or marching to the beat of your own drum. I forget the exact words, but The hardest part, and for me included, just try and get someone to think for themselves and then articulate that. And then, okay, let's go with that.
Hmm. I once heard, and it was from a book called Your Money or Your Life. And we read it in the 1990s. So we were young and stupid, and we needed some help. And one of the most extraordinary lines in there was that money is essentially an exchange of life energy. So if you go to the cash register and you see the little bobble, the marketing thing, they put a basket of whatever there, and you just reach for it. This was me. I was the spendthrift. And it said, consider that you're exchanging your life energy for that thing. How long is it going to bring you joy? Is it actually necessary? Is this something you need? And I began to think about it differently because I grew up strangely, the first 9 years, I thought I was a princess, a rich princess. And then the next, divorce, all the things, the poor pauper, Cinderella. I want you to talk to me about the mindsets that we come into through our childhood. Because I've also read that people who grew up wealthy, it's easier for them to acquire or accumulate or create wealth because it's part of their mindset. So, how do you shift out of, I was a food stamp kid? How do you shift out of that and
First,
create?
first of it, to answer your question, is with most things, you measure it or you recognize it. So I'll make a quick metaphor and then come back if that's all right. And it connects.
Hmm?
You mentioned health and wealth. One thing that I do to encourage folks is obviously getting healthy or being healthy or I'm healthy, all those statements are very subjective. And with fads that come in and out forever, it's who knows if you're really healthy until you actually measure it. So whether it's your fasting glucose or your heart rate, or your waist circumference, or a variety of factors, your A1C, to go back to what you said, the answer is to measure it or recognize it. So, which means first asking yourself or someone asking you, and one of the things that I do in my first one or two meetings is I ask, what is money? And then what did money mean to you when you were a kid? And then I shut up and I just listen. I do the same thing with the other person. If usually there's two folks, what did money mean to you as a kid and what is money now? And then it's fascinating. Usually people don't just do this in the evenings. They're watching Netflix or talking about their lives. The couple usually learn something about each other. And I definitely learn something about the people I'm working with. And that deeply informs how the plan will go. It also deeply informs, oh, this is why I've always had this financial behavior because of this as a child. Now that I know it, going back to my point, I recognize it, I can keep that awareness in my head and make a different decision. And with that awareness comes the ability to go from here to bird's eye view and then make much more powerful decisions. So if you're looking down at something, you can look at the season of life and see where you are now and okay, I also need to put some money aside for my kid to go to college, for us to take more vacations in a couple of years, for us to start putting our health and our family first and spend more on food, for us to be able to be work optional in 15 years. It's hard to do that when you're just in the moment and not able to go rise above, if you will.
Yeah. Do you recommend, I think, saving, even if it's $10 a month, to begin the mindset of being able to save?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, at this point, life's all about habits. The job I did after the flying career was I was an ROTC instructor, which means I was basically a college instructor for future Marines and Navy sailors and Navy and Marine Corps officers for 3 years. And those kids make $200 a month per diem. Some of them have jobs. They're in college. And I did multiple finance classes, usually once a semester. And I would consistently be like, guys, if you're making 200 bucks, if you're not making any money, hard to save. If you're making 200 bucks, just create a habit from this account to that account, $2 to $5 a month. Usually it's 15, 25, 50, 100. Do that every month and just put it elsewhere. And that it does two things. It moves the money separately. So you start to view it differently because that's how we work when we look at our bank accounts. And then number two, it creates a habit that is much easier once those folks get employed and they're officers and their paycheck goes from $200 a month to a couple $1,000 a month or five,
Mhm.
$6,000 and then 10 and then beyond. It's you're not creating a habit. You're just changing the value of the number that's being transferred to whatever goal.
Yeah. Do you do a percentage?
You mean in general?
I forget what it was exactly, but my understanding is that we shouldn't spend more than 30% of what we make after taxes on rent. And then there should be a certain percentage going into savings, maybe a certain percentage going into personal, well, vacations, things like that. And then the rest is food and necessities, something like that. Do you have a formula?
I do not have a formula or specifics. All those rules of thumb are good in general, and I don't
Mhm.
have any beef with any of them. But when I sit down with folks, it's usually getting a little bit more specific for what their life looks like. In San Diego right now, rent and housing is just more expensive here than other places. And
Mhm.
a lot of people make it work, and there's still a lot of people here. They're not moving away. They just spit their mortgage rent category is just different than when I lived in Blacksburg, Virginia. I mean,
Mhm.
my mortgage payment there was $1,400 for a pretty large home. I now my rent here is $3,500, and that's probably and so there's just a huge difference. And
Yeah.
so rules of thumb and those thumb are helpful, but I think it's more important is you said is to put money away for three time areas. If you can
Mhm.
imagine three buckets, there's the
Mhm.
now,
Mhm.
there's the medium term, and then there's financial independence or retirement if that's a goal.
Mhm.
And then,
Mhm.
so the now is basically a savings account, a cushion, so that if something goes wrong, you have some backstop, whether it's a job or having to go to a funeral or whatever it is. The
Mhm.
medium term is for the vacations, the engagement rings, the down payment on a home, the I want to be able to switch jobs and I need some flexibility. And then the retirement's maybe the 2 decades plus 1 to 3 decades from the future. And so being able to start a habit of any kind of putting money here, putting money there, and putting money in the third bucket. And so when money comes your way, however you earn income, it's you're using it for the now and you're also putting it away for the later you and then the much later you. That's how I usually, and those levers we can certainly change, but that's in general how I think about it.
So, do you recommend to people that they have a 3 to 6 month, the just in case account that if you get sick or if you lose your job or what have you, I forget what you call this.
I would say emergency savings. Yeah, emergency savings just in case. But yeah, absolutely. And the three, whether you go towards 3 or whether you go towards 6 months, is going to be dependent on how secure you either believe or your job actually is. And
Hmm.
so I've been in a situation where I've been much more, I've had a smaller one because my paycheck has been relatively consistent and almost guaranteed by the US government. Although months ago, there was a little bit of the budget was about to not, they were about to not pay about 1 million military members. So again,
Wow.
nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah.
However, if in a situation now where I'm getting out of the Navy and starting my own business, my runway, my just in case account is definitely going, it's going longer than 6 months. I'm beefing that up. And so again, it's going to
Hmm.
be dependent.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about time being non-renewable. Can you talk about that? Can you expand on that?
Hmm. I don't know if I have much to add other than every moment that passes is gone.
Hmm.
And I think, again, you only realize how non-renewable or you just can't, how time is when you look backwards. So this morning, I did not exercise or go on a walk. My family normally does. My son was sleeping in. He just had a surgery. But my daughter and I just connected, read books, laughed, giggled on the couch at 6 a.m. with each other for 30 minutes. And I chose to put my laptop away and just do that. Had I not done that, I wouldn't have realized how magical and awesome and amazing that time was. And I
Hmm.
think for me, just to go, maybe I did have more to say. One more point is the benefit of my experience in the military and the Navy specifically is that I lived in a ship disconnected from the world for over 18 months, missing out on it was during the COVID pandemic, during 2018, during 2019, and then last year. So for 4 different periods of time, I've been disconnected for 6 months at a time from loved ones and of course just general culture.
Hmm.
When that happens, you usually have a longing for something. I wish I could just be at the park and do this, or I can go
Hmm.
whatever that thing is.
Hmm.
And so I can just go to that place really easily and be like, hey, this seems mundane, and it is mundane, but I know I've longed and dreamt about this silly little thing, literally
Hmm.
touching grass and with my bare feet or going on a jog on ground that's not moving. dozens of times.
Taking nothing for granted. I love that. I went to Europe when I was 20. I backpacked through Europe, 13 different countries and three for 3 months. It is exactly what you're saying. All the music changed by the time I got back. I missed my things. I missed having my things around me. It was the most extraordinary thing I had done up to that point in my life. I'm so glad I did it. But also there was that peace where I longed for something that was a part of the fabric of the life I had built. So interesting. It occurs to me, I was thinking about this the other day because I've recently gotten into football. A crazy person, never liked football in my life, but I watched a documentary on Netflix and it was called Quarterback. And then there was one on receivers. And I fell in love with the characters these people are. But then I began to think about they come from all different backgrounds. But some of them come from absolutely nothing. And they're making millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And then there's another documentary which I think I'll watch, but it made me sad. A lot of them get to after the career is over and they have bought everyone a house, they've bought everyone a car, they have all the bling, they've done the thing, and they have nothing in the bank. Now what? So I'm thinking, what are they doing when they hire these guys? They should be giving them you so you can teach them how to manage the money. But and then I'll stop talking. It's also the lottery. They've done studies on that. Millions of dollars and it's gone in 3 to 7 years or something because they don't know how to manage it. So what would you do with people like that?
I think what would I do? Well, first, there's a bias. There's a heuristic that it's escaping me, a financial heuristic or bias that when the money basically came out of nowhere, gambling winnings or maybe a stock portfolio goes really high,
Okay.
you are disconnected from it. It's not money you come in from your paycheck where it's direct work for time. And so I
Yes.
would imagine you basically get very fortunate and you win the lottery, or you maybe your first round draft pick, or you get a nice QB contract and you have a 7 year, $100 million contract,
Yeah.
or now they're larger. But
I know.
when that happens, I don't, there's just such a disconnect from that amount of money that you spend it differently than you ever would have, than as if you earned it in a fashion that was consistent with how you were raised. And
Mhm.
so I think you desperately have to try to connect that money. You have to fight that. You have to know it's there, be aware of it, and then fight against it so that you can not just, of course, you want to be generous. And a lot of those folks do buy a lot of things for their family, but you also have to consider, again, the now, the medium term, and then the long term. And I feel if you're in that situation, you can even work backwards because a lot of people, you just fund, hey, I want to have X lifestyle where I can spend $300,000, maybe more in that situation per year, age 60. And then from 40 to 60, it's this much. You fund you fund the much later you, and then you have the pot of money now. But usually what happens is you just burn through the pot of money now, or you spend irresponsibly, and then you're like, well, now what?
Yeah, I love the pot of money for the future. Let's talk about success, how you defined success and how you help your people realize, I'm sure, that they are successful in many ways. How can they shift what they maybe are comparing themselves to or judging themselves about with success?
We talked about balance a little bit earlier in the podcast. And so people usually seek out a financial advisor or a financial planner because there's some problem you want to fix in your finances, which is great. However, we talk about success, and as you were saying it, I thought about wealth. And of course, people, I want more financial wealth. What they're not always telling you, but they certainly all have a desire to, is to have more time wealth, social wealth, physical wealth, or I guess to answer your question about success, it's once you ask the questions about if money were no object, first, what is money? Then, if money were no
Mhm.
object, what's important to you? And then after that, how do you define success? And then usually, if once the first couple times I ask those questions, people want to incorporate money into the question because they're talking to a finance guy, and that's fine. But after the second or third time, and let's just forget money right now. Let's just pretend you just got really lucky or you have all the money in the world. What's actually important to you? Once you get to that just intuition, what's important to that individual or couple, they
Mhm.
define success for you. And then all I'm doing is reflecting it back to them to make sure I understand, maybe a little bit of encouragement or harder question asking. And then it's cool. Cool. I've got what I need to help you execute what you just talked about. Let's do it. And then we'll refine it in 6 months or a year when we visit again. And it's just you're iterating because, of course, life changes and what we view as successful to us changes. And that's okay.
So, what do you say to people who, and I've run into many different cases, many different scenarios. For example, a couple who gives and gives and gives and gives and throws parties and gives and helps that person out and helps that family person out and gives. And now they get to the place where they've got nothing and they're exhausted. And now what? That's one. The other scenario is a young couple with young kids and they want to give them the best and they give them the best of everything. And whether it's private schools or horse lessons or whatever it is, they're giving and giving and giving. And they get to now the kids go off to college and they're having great lives. And mom and dad now have to keep working their tails off because they gave it all away. The kids didn't ask for it. They wouldn't have known the difference. So, how do you help people? I mean, that's some ingrained, deep belief system stuff. So, what do you do? How do you help them?
Well, I certainly can't change anyone's behavior but when in that situation, it's just a confirmation of if you make this decision, then this is the likely outcome. Here's what I
Mhm,
recommend. It's, of course, your decision. So in that
mhm,
case, if we're actually sitting down and we're saying, hey, private school costs this much or whatever the amount is, and at this point in time, we're not going to have this amount of money here to do Y. If they're okay with that, then all right, let's do it.
mhm.
As long as there's an awareness, I can only do so much. That's the perspective I bring. But usually almost every conversation is, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I heard you say A, but you are doing B.
Mhm.
What do you think about aligning this with A? And then they
Mhm.
say, huh, that's a good point. And then we just make subtle or big shifts to find a balance between usually two various outcomes or goals.
I remember being your age. And I also remember thinking my age was way off in the distance, never
Mhm.
going to happen. Literally, knowing that we all get old and we all move on and life happens and it didn't matter. I was the exception. It was never going to happen. Tomorrow's forever away. So, how does one wake up to that? It's
Wake
around the
up.
corner. The
How do,
future's around the corner.
you mean how does one wake up to the fact that the end of later becomes much sooner than you expect?
Here's the question. How do you get leverage on people? Because we need leverage in order to change or to do something uncomfortable or to push off our gratification. We need to have the leverage in order to do that. So for me to know in my 30s that someday I was going to be in my 60s and that it would be very smart of me to have that future bucket that you talked about. How do I get the leverage on myself at that point to know or at least trust that that is a way to go?
All right, great question. Here's my answer.
Okay.
I love working with millennials, 30, 40-year-olds, overachieving, hardworking people. And so, an example of a couple client that I have that live in Utah, both are realtors and both do really well. One of them comes from a lot of wealth, one of them doesn't. And with the one that doesn't, this is an easier conversation because that person just looks at his parent and they did what you described. They did not put too much away in their 30s, 40s, 50, and into their 50s, 60s to so they have to work longer than they want to and do things that they would prefer not to do. And
Hmm.
so in that situation, when you have that experience or that personal, oh yeah, my mom is experiencing that, it's much easier to communicate, let's do the opposite, basically. Or that's a good example of what not to do. Here's how we can move towards. So the leverage is basically in-person, close relationship that they deeply empathize with and then probably want to make a different decision. In the case of the other parents, the wife of this couple, her parents are doing really well. She has a really great example to follow. My parents got it going on. Let's do this and not that. It's not always that easy, but making a connection to the real world, because you're right. It's really hard for young people, including me, to be, I'm never going to be 60 or 70 or whatever you view
Doesn't
as
that sound
old.
old?
Exactly. Yeah. I used to think 60 is old, and now that I'm in my 30s, and 60 is not that old.
Oh,
Um,
dude, what's old? 90. That's what I was.
exactly. Exactly. It just keeps moving.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think there's much that can really wake us up to the fact that, shoot, I've been in a helicopter crash and I still think I'm going to be young forever. But I think unless it's connecting to generations before us that are there and either good, meet average, or not so good
Yeah.
examples.
I really wanted to have this conversation with you because I do feel there's so much freedom when a person has a handle on this portion of life. And they don't have to be rich. They don't have to have, I mean, that's subjective. They don't have to have that to have the freedom. They need to manage it well, however that is. And I think to have any of this, there's an awareness. That's what this podcast is about for me, for them, is an awareness of this piece of life. What are you doing, whether you're in your 20s? Because I've got people from all age ranges that listen and watch. What are you doing? What are you doing in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s? And to what you were saying, everybody teaches us who we want to be and who we don't want to be. So no matter what, they're a teacher. My mother was a fabulous teacher in the realm of money. I've never seen anyone sabotage themselves the way she could. It was remarkable. So in my 30s, I think it's interesting because 30s seems to be the 20s are about who am I?
Mhm.
And then the 30s are you take who you are and you begin to build your empire,
Yep.
right? So the 30s are a really important decade, especially around money.
I couldn't agree more. All right. I have so much to say.
Oh,
I couldn't agree more about the 30s, which is why I love working with young families and young people. And again, young is relative, right? You can be young, and I used to deny that. I would not deny that. What I mean is 30 and 40-year-olds, because you have more time to make lifestyle and financial tweaks to
yes.
set yourself up and your family without just, we're talking 2-degree course corrections, to use the 2-degree flying analogy. You fly from California to New York, 2 degrees is a huge difference.
Yes.
You do that early, you can do subtle corrections. If when you get to your 50s or whatever the time period is, later on, you have to make much more aggressive corrections and turns and changes in your life, selling homes or doing this or not being near your grandkids, whatever it is,
Hmm.
that it just gets really frustrating. It's okay because life throws us all curveballs. But I
Hmm.
love working with that demographic of 30 and 40-year-olds because we have time. So chronic disease example, it's much easier to figure out if you have a proclivity towards metabolic dysfunction, or which leads to a bunch of other sicknesses and diseases in your 40s than it is your 60s. By the time you're 60, you can certainly make lifestyle choices that can reverse things, but it's much easier a couple decades.
So
So,
let's talk about that. Let's
and
talk about, oh, was there something more on that?
I was going to share one more thing, but it's
Yes.
fine. Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, second thing, it's not related to health, but we talked about what is money earlier a little bit. We had a conversation about the money scripts when we were kids, and I just wanted to touch on that because it's pervasive through everything.
Hmm.
The other reason I really love this whole conversation in personal finance is because money and sexuality, so deeply important to our human experience. And we learn those things pretty much by the time we're 7 years old, is what the researchers say, just subconsciously through our parents and our environment.
Mhm.
The what is money? I asked that question earlier. I'll give you my answer and then talk a little bit about how important it is. So I would posit that money is basically it's a tool. We usually view a dollar or some sort of object, but it's just a measure of your labor and your time because you traded labor and time to earn dollars or whatever currency that, or maybe asset or commodity that you earn. It's very tricky right now and in general when we all think and of our wealth or our financial health in terms of United States dollars or pesos or yen or euros. However, the currencies are A, beyond our control, and two, they're being debased always. And when I say debased, I mean diluted.
Mhm.
So the dollar that we usually transact and get paid and think in is when we think about a stock or a portfolio or even a cup of coffee, we think about it in terms of dollars in the US. However, what we don't always consider, there has been a hot topic lately of inflation, is how much is that actually worth in reference to something, to other things? And is that being debased by entities above yourself? So maybe a government or whatever else that has more control over that currency. And so asking yourself, what is money psychologically as a kid, but also what is money? I have a labor and time. And if someone else has control over this instrument to be able to dilute the effort that me or my family has put into this, you obviously want to be able to protect that and protect or earn over your purchasing power because ultimately our purchasing power is being eroded over time.
Mhm.
It's a slightly different discussion than the health thing. It gets a little bit more macroeconomic,
Mhm.
but it does also get personal because for some reason, we still view millionaires being rich. Even
Mhm.
though the book Millionaire Next Door, I think, was written in 1996,
Yep. Should be
that
billionaire next door.
I did the math on the basically inflation rate. It's $2.1 million now, or somewhere around there. S-
Okay.
But we still think if I'm a millionaire, I'll be rich. It's a million's not going to get you as far as it did in the mid 90s. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying that is or isn't okay, but we have to know that and then figure out a plan to overcome that because it's newsflash, at least in the next decade, it's not changing. It's only exacerbating with everything going on.
Yeah, yeah. So to that point, what are your thoughts on the stock market and investing from a young age? So it's exponential, right? It's compounded over time. Starting an account for a child, for example, and just putting in $100 a month or something like that. And what are your thoughts about all that?
Yeah, the time value of money is the first thing that most people in personal finance or you read a blog is you learn. And that's exactly what you're talking about. You start 10 years earlier doing much less money,
Mhm.
that compounds to much greater than if you start 10 years later with even a larger dollar amount.
Mhm.
So if one has an idea of giving some amount of money to their children later on down the road, I absolutely lean towards figuring out a plan to share that now.
Mhm.
There's a book written called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. I love the book and the premise, but the premise is basically to spend your money a little bit we talked about. And don't wait until the very end to spend all your money. Start spending your money now, giving it away, passing it along now, so that when you get to the end of your life, it's you're dying with close to zero, if you will, than dying with a big pile of money, which does not many people very good. But to go back to your point, I absolutely encourage folks that have the ability and capacity to save and invest for their future goals 30 years down the road, and also children, nieces, close godparent, godchildren, people around them that they want to bless when they're teenagers or at whatever point in their life. Because if you plan for the future, you can do so with even less resources. I'll just give one more tangible example. My kids have a retirement account. They're 5 and 2 years old. Another one would be just creating a separate account in a brokerage account with whatever brokerage you have. Maybe it's Fidelity, Charles Schwab, with your financial advisor for car fund for when the kid turns 18, There's special accounts for college, but I was going to say for a wedding fund, if you want to participate in a wedding or anything around there, or maybe your kid's down payment on their first home or whatever it is, and you create in a separate account. And mentally, you have money going to that account at some recurring period. And then
Mhm.
if you ever, it's much easier than if there's just one global account. It's hard to mentally bucket it out. But if you can separate, hey, this is for this goal, this is
Mhm.
for me and my spouse, and this is for our children, this specific goal, it A makes it much easier to save for that. And then it makes it much harder to take money away and use it for something else, which we've probably all been guilty of.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I like the wedding bucket. I didn't think of
Yeah,
that.
abs-
My dad bought my older sister a car. It was a clunker, but he bought her a car. So I'm like, that means I'm going to get a car. That's not what happened. But I didn't save because I was counting on him giving me a clunker. So that was one of my first big lessons financially. And so I actually did set up $25 a month for my kids. I don't know what they must have been 10 or 15, something like that. And that was a stretch at the time. $25 a month was a stretch.
oh yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, even if it's five, what do you think traditional financial models miss off the top of your head?
When you say traditional financial models, do you mean you probably don't mean the act portfolio model. What do you mean?
Let's say somebody who they go to a bank, they're talking to a banker, and the banker says you should do this and this. They're missing maybe the human aspect of it, or what do you think? What's the most important piece?
I'll answer it indirectly or pretty quickly, but what I do is it's called values-led fee-only financial planning. So
Hmm.
values-led meaning I lead with your values. So I first ask you things we talked about at the beginning, but what is important to you? What are your values now? And then fee only is just you pay me for the advice, not the products. So there's less conflicts of interest. But
Hmm.
what that banker's probably not going to do, or maybe even though you read a blog, they're not going to ask and then reflect back to you your values. That's number one. And then modifying the estate plan, the tax plan, the retirement plan, the debt plan, the cash flow plan with those values in mind. What I
Yeah.
do is take the technical expertise to knowing the One Big Beautiful Bill Act tax code and understanding the different accounts we can use for different periods of time and your situation, compile it with your values, put it in the washing machine, and then spit out, hey, let's do this. And then we make adjustments to it.
Yeah. So the question is, what are your values? What's going on now? Is that aligned with what your values are? And where do we tweak it to get that in alignment,
Right.
basically?
Yes.
Okay.
And then
All
as a bonus, that banker's probably not going to talk to them about we can have the people I work with usually make a decent amount of money or they're pretty driven individuals. That banker's probably not going to talk to them about how to prioritize their health or what to do, what's the first step and how to prioritize their health because those folks are probably going to have a decent amount of money later in life if they can just keep a habit of investing for their future. But
right.
that's relatively meaningless if you don't have the energy, wits, strength, or existence later. If you're just not around.
Yeah, without health, there is no wealth. So you've mentioned health a couple of times. Is that always part of the package? Do you always, if they're open to it, do you
Yeah,
address that to them directly?
I started my business to talk about health.
Ah,
I would have probably went and worked for another small registered investment advisor, RIA, or financial advising firm. But I wanted to bring this message in. You got to be delicate with the subject, of course,
yeah.
but and I don't push anything on anybody, but I absolutely incorporate this into my conversations because before this, I wanted to, between helicopter and this, I was going to be a doctor. And then I was studying soil science because I was trying to solve chronic health and soil health, or at least look into pesticides, herbicides, and soil. Is there a soil health, human health connection? So this is what I want to do and why I started my firm. So the answer is a resounding heck yes.
Okay, good. Huge, huge piece. So, what have I not asked you that you think is important to share?
I would be curious, the people that you work with, do you think most of them are future minded, if you will, with their resources or just in general, or present minded? They need to save and invest more, or it's the opposite where they save and invest too much?
I work with a lot of older people at this point because of Second Act TV, and they're in the future. It's the 30s and the 20s that I really recommend to them that they open a Charles Schwab immediately and they have $100 going into that account without even looking at it. And so the little things that I've learned along the way, I will share. I'm not a financial advisor, but I do really address that. It's mostly for me energetic spiritual work,
Yeah,
but the money's a big piece, the health's a big piece, relationships a big piece. It's all interwoven.
it
Did
is.
I answer
And
your question?
you did. And it actually got me thinking about something that maybe I wanted to ask and didn't think of it. But the cool thing about money, personal finance, this whole topic is that it's so central to our lives. My kid's 5 and people go up to him and ask him, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to do? And just a lot of these things, whether it's a career or when you're retired, they center around being able to survive and therefore pay someone for their goods and services. And so
Hmm.
it's so central to the way we live our lives that it gets to who you are, who you want to be really quickly. And that's what I enjoy about it.
You saw me start to talk. Universal money with AI. What are your thoughts on that? Have you thought about it? Have you studied it at all? You know what I'm talking about?
Do you mean universal basic income? Or,
Yes. Hmm.
okay, so you're, just to be clear before I answer, you're referencing universal basic income, where if AI gets so productive and displaces so many jobs, there will be a
Hmm.
need for income because people won't have jobs. Is that what you're referencing?
Yes. Yes. But that's more of a survivalist look at it. What I'm thinking is it becomes so abundant that those jobs are taken care of, that people are then able to have that universal income and do things like paint and pottery and live a higher quality of life. That's kind of utopian, of course, which is the way I lean. What do you think? Is that coming? Is it possible?
Okay, all right. Glad you asked. This gets fun. In the United States, I'd say we're in a K-shaped economy,
Yes.
meaning if you can visualize a K, the top part of the K, maybe some of the people you work with are doing really well
Hmm.
because for some period of time, probably a long time, they've owned assets. They've
Hmm.
owned homes, they've owned business equity, or probably those two things, because the stock market is just equity or ownership in businesses, right? And those things, assets, homes, commodities, and the technology companies, those have outperformed the currency because the currency is being debased by governments around the world. No single government is really at fault. Everyone is printing more money or basically issuing more debt to put dollars, yen, you name it, into the world, which then dilutes the underlying currency. The
Hmm.
bottom part of the K, so that's those people.
Hmm.
On this part of the K, which most people are down here,
Hmm.
wage growth, and I don't know if this is going to mirror or not, but wage growth has been this for the past couple decades, and why you have movements we've had politically all over the world for at least the past 10 years. Wage growth's been very flat. Asset growth has been this.
Hmm.
And so just to go back a little bit, has been and probably will be increasing tension because it's not a new story, but anytime there's a significant amount of wealth inequality in society, it doesn't usually end well because it gets displaced towards the top. That is a challenge. And it most likely gets exacerbated with AI because the productivity will, at least in the short term, displace a lot of jobs.
Hmm.
I happen to be positive in the sense that we're in an industrial revolution now, an AI industrial revolution. When you come out of an industrial revolution, there are more jobs for everybody, just there has been in the past. I don't think this one's unique, and we'll all just be sitting around doing nothing, jobless. But in the middle, when you are sitting in the middle of it, we are now, and my job is getting taken away. For example, I'm looking at AI software to help me with sales outbound right now. That means people who are doing sales outbound, making phone calls or drafting emails, they're getting displaced by that AI software that can do that. They're going to have to figure out a new skill. And when you're having to figure out a new skill, that's very painful in the short term.
Hmm.
That being said, that productivity, and by productivity, business owners don't need to pay as many people. Therefore, there's not as much of a need for labor, at least in the short term, until new jobs are created. That can get problematic in terms of the people on the bottom of the K not getting the money they need to survive or to live their life, therefore necessitating some sort of universal basic income.
Got
And
it.
some would suggest that's already occurring now. There's already money that's basically being poured towards, basically given out to the masses, if you will, through indirect means to get ahead of that.
Hmm. Interesting. It's an interesting time
It
that
is
we live
it,
in.
it always is, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
a super interesting time.
It feels more complex, but also maybe not. It's
And
just an interesting time.
it is. Can
So
I add one? Do you mind if I add one more thing here?
please do.
This connects to something that I'm passionate about talking about, which we haven't talked about yet, and that's one unique cryptocurrency called Bitcoin. I don't want to hijack the conversation. I think it's fair because it's just so fundamental to me that gold and then Bitcoin or both are so interesting. Gold's been money for 6,000 years. In 2025, gold, I think it went up over 100% when you compare it to dollars. That's why if you look at a gold chart of the past 2 decades, that's a pretty significant move for
Hmm.
something. If you look at it the other way, so that was gold to US dollars, it's 100%. Another way to view it is the US dollar got 60% less valuable when you compare it to gold.
Mm.
And I mentioned Bitcoin, I'm using an example of gold. And I referenced earlier about our currency being debased. I think for everyone, especially for young folks who have much more time for your labor and your time, aka your money, to be debased by basically our governments, it's important to figure out a way to protect your purchasing power. And there's certainly more than one. Ownership, the traditional stock market works, and a lot of my clients, a decent amount of their assets are there.
Hmm.
However, it's an interesting time, like you said, and unique. Bitcoin is very unique due to its characteristics of being decentralized, being finite, and decentralized, a specific government's control, unprintable, if you will. It's
Hmm.
public or transparent, so everyone can basically audit or see what's going on. It's finite. There's only a certain amount. It's 21 million. It's secure. There's 99% uptime in the network. It's durable. There are these characteristics that if we just got back and said, let's make a perfect money and call it perfect money. And we just made a checklist of, I want it to be transparent. I want it to be durable. I want it to be beyond any one government or entity's control. And you go and check those boxes. Bitcoin is the near perfect asset or money we have right now. And so it's a very interesting use case and study for how to protect your labor and your time and for now and for the future. I'll just leave it there. I wanted to incorporate that into the conversation because, that's not just the rest of crypto because Bitcoin's fundamentally different because
Okay.
of its, go ahead.
Was it Bitcoin last year? I felt that was volatile last year. What happened with that?
So actually, it depends on year to date. I think it was about 8% down,
Okay.
where it went from mid probably $80,000 in January up to $125,000 and then finished the year in the high 80s or 90s. There's definitely absolutely a risk volatility conversation that you have to
Mhm.
have when you're incorporating that into your portfolio.
Got
So
it.
we talk
Okay.
about short-term buckets. You don't want it's nonsensical to put a volatile stock or volatile commodity coin into I need it in 6 months. That's not what I'm
Right.
saying.
Right.
What I am saying is on a long-term store of value, it checks a lot of store of value buckets, and you go back through the list of things you care about and pick your currency of choice. It may not check all those boxes you thought it would.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm glad you did include that. So, where can people find you if they want to work with you?
I meet with most people that are interested in looking to work with me or clients virtually.
Mhm.
I'm on most social platforms as True Wealth Zach, except for X, I'm at Zach underscore Rod. And then I have a website as well where you can learn more about my financial planning firm, outlivefinancial.com. And so
Outlivefinancial.com. Okay,
and how I help people is ongoing financial planning relationships that may or may not include wealth management. So financial planning, tax, retirement, debt, estate. There's something we didn't talk about, risk management, insurance to make sure you're protected. Because if you lean towards being risky, but your downside's not protected, what are we doing? So incorporating those things and investment management into the things that we already talked about, and then walking through life with people as things change and as the new tax year comes and goes.
I think the greatest gift of working with you would be the clarity that comes. That would be huge, even if that's all they got was clarity around their finances and where they're going. So, thank you for being here today. I
Thank you
have
for
one more
saying that. I
question.
appreciate it. Sure.
Okay, here it is. How do you recommend that the listeners go out and live their most alive lives?
I was thinking about this I listened to a few podcasts and heard you say this. And I would go back to something, and maybe I'm cheating, but I'd go back to that rocking chair test.
Mm,
Or if you can zoom forward, pick your 1, 2, 3 decades, and then look back to where you are now, and then just ask yourself if you'd feel good about that, or if you're really excited about that decision, or if you're, I don't know, and then just go for the bold one, or go for the one that makes you really excited or proud in that future rocking chair moment, or whatever that is. I
love
think
that.
that will lead to a live life for sure.
Thank you. We touched on a lot of things, and I really appreciate this conversation. I think it'll be very valuable for people. If this conversation resonated with you, I invite you to go deeper. You can work with Zach on your finances, or you can pick up my book, Stop, Look, Choose Your Journey to Peace and Freedom, which is a guide to helping you slow down, interrupt unconscious patterns, and choose your life with intention, moment by moment. As always, if this episode moved you, please rate, review, and share Wake Up with Joni. It's how this work finds the people who need it most. My favorite part. Now, beautiful humans, it's your turn to go out and live your most alive lives.